So, hello and welcome back to Strathpeffer Junction. I have something a little bit different today actually. So far I haven't done any reviews or unboxings or anything like that on my channel. I know a lot of people do them. I've so far liked to focus on some of the tinkering with electronics and modifications and other things, but I think I probably will do the odd review of some of my favourite locos and other things as I'm going along with the channel. And today this came through the post. It's Hatton's brand new Andrew Barclay 040 saddle tank steam loco. Now, for those of you who've been following my channel, you'll have seen that mainly I focus on diesel, and I have to say diesel is my favourite. It's the kind of sound and smells and experiences of my childhood growing up, and it's the part of railway modelling that I love the best. But I do have a soft spot for the odd steam locomotive as well, and particularly those that are in a Caledonian Railway livery. So when Hatton said that they were bringing out the 040 and that it was going to have a Caledonian variant, I thought, well, I'm going to have to buy myself one of those. So what I'm going to have to do in this video is just unbox it really quickly. Not going to take too much time over that. I'm going to have a wee look about the actual model itself, just very quickly. A quick look at the history of the model. I'll do a few wee shots. It's a lovely sunny day actually up here in the Highlands, so I might take it outside and see if I can get some shots in daylight. And then what I'm going to do, because I run a DCC layout, or will do, everything I do gets chipped, so I'm going to do a little bit on chipping the locomotive just at the end as well. So without further ado, I'll get this out of the box and let's have a look at what we've got. So as tends to be the case with Hattons and Helgen, you get a pretty good substantial box. It's full of foam. You've got your instructions. You've got your fairly standard these days ice cube, iceberg, whatever you want to call it. As with all of these, it's exactly the same way to open it, so I'm not going to linger on all of that. Let's get into the actual meat of it. So you get a few detailing parts with it here. There looks to be a little hose pipe connections and some hooks as well, some couplings for the front and rear of the loco. So always nice to add those on. In the box itself, into there, it comes totally wrapped up in this funny kind of plastic wrap that we see in most of the locos that we get these days, just to protect parts from scratching and what have you. But we'll release that anyway from all of the packaging. We'll dump all that out of the way, and let's see what we actually have. Well, it's a fabulous little model. As I say, steam isn't really my cup of tea normally, but the detailing on this model is absolutely beautiful. It really is, as these little locomotives go. We've got some fabulous detail. I mean, the actual printing as well, the Caledonian Railway motif there in the middle is just absolutely beautiful. And one thing that I have to say that I think probably steam model locos have over diesel is that the cabs in the higher end ones are generally really beautifully detailed, and this is no exception. You've got the driver and the fireman's gears and levers in there. It's really beautifully done, each individually added on, I think, and some beautiful colour detail too. So really, all in all, just from a kind of brief visual perspective, it's really a beautiful model. But I'll move this box out the way anyway, and we'll take a closer look at some of the specific details. Okay, so just having a look at some of the details then of the model itself. We've got just some fabulous applied detail at the front here around the chimney section, handrails as well, all lovely detail, sprung buffers of course that we would expect, around the valves as well, and the pistons, really beautifully put together. And I think one of the things which is really lovely as well is that, unlike some of these smaller locomotives, when you are actually running it, the pistons and all of the assembly around there runs really smoothly as well. Some of the older ones, it can be a bit jerky and wobble a bit. You've got some lovely pipework details as well along the actual side of the saddle tank there. As I said earlier, the actual livery is applied really beautifully. You've got the safety valves, you've got the whistle on top, really nicely picked out. Let's turn it round to the back, and as I say as well, or mentioned before, the detailing in the cab itself is really beautiful, really well done. You've got the brakes and the regulators and all the other bits and pieces there to make the engine go, the reverser and so on. Really lovely detail picked out. We've got these slimline tension tension lock couplings as well that's on this, but they are in the NEM pocket standard here, so you can take them out and replace those with KD or whatever else you might want to use on those as well. In terms of the actual underneath as well, it's not been forgotten, and you have some of the brake roll. You have some of the brake rod assembly as well on the bottom there. Really nice detail. That's just some lovely details as well, with the steps there picked out beautifully, and then the actual maker's mark on the side too. So I mean, all in all, this is really a lovely little model. I'm not going to bore you with any more pointing out obvious details on it, but let's get a few shots outside now that it's a sunny day, just having a look at the model, and I'll give a quick run through as well on some of the history of Andrew Barclay and the factory and what these locomotives were used as. So, this iconic 040 steam locomotive was built by Andrew Barclay Sons Co, a locomotive building company based in Kilmarnock, Scotland. Born in 1814, Andrew was an industrious chap, and at only 25 years old, he set up a partnership with Thomas McCulloch to manufacture mill shafts. A couple of years later, he branched out on his own to manufacture gas lamps, but as became a trend with his businesses, he encountered problems and eventually found himself in locomotive design and manufacturing. After a long period of operation, during which he himself was removed as the director of his own company by shareholders, his company was bought and sold by various groups, eventually ending up as part of Wabtec. Over the years, Andrew Barclay Co became known for producing their standardised saddle tank locos, mainly for industrial use, and they had a small selection of options which made them very attractive to prospective buyers. Thousands of 040s were built by Andrew Barclay, starting in the late 1800s. Many survived longer than mainline steam under BR, with some still running as steam powered into the 70s. Okay, so before I move on to installing the DCC chip, I thought I'd just give it a quick whiz on the rolling road in DC, just to have a look at how it performs. Now, I have run this in for about 15 minutes in either direction, so the performance should be a little bit better than it would be straight out of the box. But anyway, let's give it a whiz in forward direction and see how we get on. Now, one thing I would mention is that there is a little bit of wobble on the locomotive here. Now, I have tried this on a length of track as well as on the rolling road itself, and the wobble isn't nearly as bad when it's actually running on track. I have noticed before actually that these DCC Concepts rolling road modules can introduce a little bit more wobble, or could perhaps worsen wobble. That's already there. But anyway, let's put it up to a little bit faster. Really quite a quiet motor, which is really nice. These more modern motors that you get, that electronic noise doesn't sort of destroy the sense of place, you know, in the steam days or whatever era that we're playing with. Okay, so I think we'll pop it onto the other direction just very quickly to see how we get on. Tap the speed up a little bit there. Okay, so I think we'll call it a day there on the DC front, and let's take off the lid, have a look under the bonnet, and get the DCC chip installed. Okay, so as ever when I'm doing a DCC chip installation, I like to use a foam cradle or something similar just to protect the locomotive body and the paintwork and the liveries. Now, in these kind of models with so much delicate detail, it's really important that you use something like this just to make sure you don't damage it, because it can be so easy to do. But anyway, let's jump in with this. There's two screws here that we need to remove first of all, so we'll just get on with that. One of the things that I like about many of these newer locomotives is that they have tended to listen to complaints from modelers, and more often than not they're a little bit easier to get into than some of the older ones, but there's the odd exception to that rule anyway, so and I don't want to jinx myself on that. So anyway, we've taken out those two little screws, and there's a couple of little pipes which we need to remove too. So I'll just rearrange the position here and we'll get those out. Okay, so I've flipped the foam on its side and we have the actual loco on its side now. And what I will try to show you, if it's going to come out in the camera, is the next little pipe that needs to come out. Hopefully you'll see it here. There's a tiny little brass coloured pipe that goes into the side of the loco, and that just needs to be very carefully lifted out. It's not glued in place or anything like that, so just a set of tweezers, just very carefully into the top of that, and pull it out. There we go. That's it out. So that should now be the body free to be lifted away. So I'll just remove the foam and we'll do that. Okay, right. Best laid plans and all that. Right, the instructions said that release the two screws, release the two pipes, and it will easily lift away. Now I've been at this for about 10 minutes, very carefully trying to prise it away. And what I have discovered is that on my particular model here, and this could happen to you as well, so I'll mention it, there are some wishbone suspension pieces just in here and just in here. And I don't know if it's because they've been glued in slightly the wrong place or there's a slight sort of tolerance issue, but they were pushing just by like 0.5 millimetre out slightly, which meant that the body itself was unable to slide out at the front, and it was holding it fast as if it had been super glued. So what I needed to do was use something, I used the back of this paintbrush in the end, just to push in against the wishbones there, just to push in, just to free them. And now that I've freed it, the whole assembly here is starting to move away from the body. But do be very careful. If this has happened to mine, then my guess is I'll not be the only person who will have that problem. So with that near disaster averted, we can continue just to take off the body and separate it just very carefully from the actual chassis itself. This one is really incredibly tight. There's other bits and pieces here of detailing, which is... Oh, that bit, the glue is gone on. It's not broken, it's just no longer glued. So I really hope that this isn't actually how most of Hatton's 040s are in this range, because really this is not ideal. And when you're dealing with a small locomotive like this anyway, with lots of tiny fiddly and very delicate parts, having this kind of basic problem that you can't get the body off despite having followed the instructions is not ideal. So what I'm going to do anyway is I'm going to go off camera. I'll take my time just to free up the last little bit and then come back, and hopefully we can get this decoder fitted without any problems on that front. Okay, great. I finally got the body and the chassis moved. What had happened there in the second one was that in trying my very best to free the body and the chassis, one of the little pipes had got caught. It'll be okay, it's a little bit bent, but I'll be able to move it back into place. But really, we shouldn't be seeing this kind of like difficulty when it's meant to be two screws. So I think I probably jinxed it at the beginning of the video, saying that these newer ones are getting easier to take apart. But anyway, disaster averted. We'll pop this back onto the foam and just pop it out of the way for now, and let's have a look at the actual chassis and the decoder itself. Okay, so unless you bought this decoder DCC fitted, it will come with a tiny little blanking plug in the 6-pin chip. So it's a 6-pin chip chassis, this one, but that'd be kind of to be expected really with it being so small. Now, as I say, I like to have all mine DCC fitted because that's what the layout's going to be. So for this one, I just bought Hatton's own brand 6-pin chip, well, for the only reason, to be honest, so that I knew that it was compatible. Okay, well, you might be able to tell from the change of top that actually a couple of days has passed since the previous half of the video was shot. as the, the wee message that popped up on screen just a second ago in your timeline shows, I actually had a bit of an issue. So it wasn't just getting the body off that was a bit of a problem. It was also getting a decoder that would work with this particular locomotive was a problem. So when I had bought the locomotive from Hatton's on pre-order, they had recommended this Hatton 6-pin chip to go with it. So I duly bought it, and this arrived weeks ago, and the locomotive arrived just a few days ago. Unfortunately, in the sort of intervening period, they seem to have changed their mind on what chip would fit this locomotive, and it seems that I'm not the only person who ended up getting the wrong chip. So this particular chip, which is the Hatton standard 6-pin decoder, doesn't fit. It's too long and you can't get the body back on. With a bit of fettling, removing plastic and so on, you might just about be able to squeeze it in, but really you shouldn't need to do that on a brand new model. So this will either be getting returned or going into my spares box. The chip that should fit, however, is the Gauge Master chip, their DCC 23 chip, which is this one here. It's slightly more expensive, and I know a few people who had pre-ordered this with the old Hatton's chip have just received an email this week as well telling them that they'll need to pay a little bit more to get this one. Anyway, I managed to get this one for a little bit cheaper than what Hatton's do, and I'm going to fit it just now. So I am hoping that the process of sticking this into that will be pretty straightforward, and that third time lucky, that I will not jinx it by saying that, and that we'll get it installed into that, and then we'll get everything running fine. So over to the installation process. Alright, so as I mentioned, it's a 6-pin plug. Now that we've managed to get into the body, the wee blanket plate here is really very easy to see. The main thing that we need to just observe when we're taking out any of these is which way around it goes and what the pin numbers are. So on this particular locomotive, pin 1 is at the front here, and then it works its way back to pin 6 next to the actual motor. So we'll just take that out. It should slide out really pretty easily, as it does, and we'll just lay that to one side. What I quite like to do when I'm laying the chips to one side is just to leave it in the same orientation that I took it out, or the plug, or whatever, just as a wee aide-memoire. So if I do happen to have a senior moment or whatever, then I have at least something that can say to me, actually it came out like that, so put the next one in again. Okay, so having said that, I have never installed Hatton's decoder, and well, I still haven't installed Hatton's decoder. I've never installed and used the Gauge Master decoder either, so I'm going to give this a wee whiz just now. I assume really that these kind of sort of mid-range decoders are probably all relatively similar, so I'll not really go into too much detail on it. We'll pop the packaging to one side. Comes in a wee bag like this, and you get the chip, tiny wee chip, and the instruction leaflet. So let's have a wee look at what we've got there then. Okay, so the chip itself is a tiny little chip. I don't know how well this will come out, but the handy thing on this particular chip is that it does have pin number 1 mentioned and marked just here. So really it should be a pretty straightforward case of just sliding this little chip in like this. Yeah. Okay, now I'm just going to pause there for a second. This chip doesn't come with any kind of insulation on it, and there's a couple of little pads there which are really close to the motor there, and I think what I'll do is just while I've got everything open, I'll put a quick wrap of Kapton tape round that decoder just to make sure that there's absolutely no chance of any kind of shorting. So I'll do that and I'll pop back in just a second. Okay, so I've put just a quick wrap of Kapton tape just around the decoder, just to prevent any potential for shorts. I'm just observing again, this is pin 1 here. Pin 1 goes in at this far end, the front if you will. So we'll just line that up again. That's all the prongs in, and we'll just pop it home. Okay, excellent. So fingers crossed that that's everything installed correctly this time, that everything will fit. What I'm just going to do very quickly is to pop this on to the test track just before I put the lid back on, just to double check everything. And then once I've got it all put back together again, then we'll give it a quick whiz on the test track in its full glory, just to make sure that it's all good for DCC operation. Right, I'm just going to very quickly mention something here. Now that I'm trying to put it back together again, there's another little bit of detailing that Hattons don't mention in the instructions that you just need to be aware of. Along the bottom here, there's some piping detail, which is partly fixed into the chassis, but it does sort of move a little bit. Now that actually inhibits the replacement of the chassis back into the body, or the body onto the chassis. Now what you need to do with these is just to move these to the side very carefully. They do pop out. Move them to the side very carefully, and then you should be able to slide the chassis back in again. And on my one, because we've got little bits protruding, I've also just got to push them in very slightly too. So it's a wee bit like that old tapping your head and rubbing your stomach all at the same time, trying to do that. But not quite as simple as the instructions make out, so do just be aware of that. Right, so we've got the body back on, we've got all the pipe work back into place. Just need to pop the screws back into where they came from, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, so it's on the test track, so let's give it some forward juice. Good bit of speed there. Let's go down to some slow running, see how we can do slow performance. This is a shunting engine after all, in many respects, so we've got some good slow-mo there, and in reverse. That's actually some pretty decent slow reverse movement there. So I think the gearing within this, the gear ratios and the DCC really helps to get a lovely action on that. So it's not been the absolute most straightforward of DCC installs, although I've had worse. There was a few surprises and a few delays, but we got there in the end. And all in all, I still think this is a beautiful little model. Maybe not without its teething problems, but it will still be a lovely addition to my particular fleet. Okay, so that's us reached the end of the video. Thanks very much for sticking with me, assuming that you did. Apologies if it was a wee bit longer than I had predicted. For the first time in history, I think not so much my fault for blabbering on this time, and more just some of the hiccups that we hit along the way. But I hope you enjoyed the video anyway. If you've got any comments or queries or questions, please just leave them in the comment section below and I'll try to get back to them. But for now, anyway, thanks for watching, and until next time, cheerio for now. Bye-bye.